Welcome to another episode of In the Line of Wire. This is Jahara, and I have with me today a young man whom I've written about on my blog, but we've got a chance to interview him because he is in Karachi for a very short time. JahanzebSherwani, he is the CEO and the founder of Jugaadi, and the product which many of you may know is called Jadoo VNC. Hi Jahanzeb.
Hi.
Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now tell us a little about yourself, where you went to school, how and when did you get to the US, and when did you think of, developing this product?
So I did my undergrad from LUMS in Lahore, and I did a computer science major and a social science minor. And I think to some extent I actually appreciated the social science minor more than the computer science major because it was really the first time where we were studying things about Pakistan and about our context, which we really didn't get in Pak studies or Islamiyat, because that's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that really made me, appreciate the social issues that we have, and also using my computer science background to try to solve them.
Okay.
And I was always, interested in technology and just like dabbling in it for the sake of dabbling in it. Not always doing something which is important just because it's fun, but then also trying to make, things that actually people use. And so, like in my first year, I made this voting application that you could just, as a LUM student, log in, and I'd put up the vote questions, but then people could just type in what they wanted, which option they wanted or whatever, and eventually made a message board and try to build some sort of social community within LUMS.
Right.
One of the best.
Which was when? This is how many years ago?
This is 98 to 2002.
Okay, so this is before all this became very popular and all these social networking applications came.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't thinking of social networking as such, but rather community building and trying to get people to talk about things. Yeah. And one of the things I'm proudest about is that this really small app that I made for the course registration office,
right?
Where there was Sadaf Kiani at the time, but she was the person who would put up all the course outlines on some place so you could see what the courses were. And I made this simple app where she just have to put them in a directory. So 99 winter, and then there's a whole folder for the files. And this web app would just like pick up the directory structure and then show it to you. And to this day, it's up. And like people, my friends, like my wife actually, who did a PhD in sociology from Cornell, she wanted to look at course outlines at many points in LUM just to see what was happening or what we did. And it's a resource that's always there, and it's it dates back to 1998.
Wow.
So it's really great that it's actually stood the test of time and it's actually being used.
And it's being used because that's what thrills you, that somebody is actually using an application that you dabbled with.
Right.
Okay.
So when I graduated from LUMS, I had this tension, which is that I wanted to do computer science because that's what I was really good at. But social science was something which showed me what was really meaningful. Eventually I got admitted to the computer science PhD program at Carnegie Mellon. And I went there and I was kind of terrified to some extent because I was like, hey, this is a great opportunity. Very few people get into the top computer science place in the world, but I don't know exactly what I want to do there.
Right.
But the best thing about Carnegie Mellon was that they have this thing called the immigration course, where all the professors looking for students present their work to you, and it's a 3-week-long thing, and then you can choose which professors you want to work with.
Wow.
And it's really great, and it's very empowering because it's your decision and you get to decide who you want to be working with. And of course there's a pairing process, but it's your vote that really matters.
Okay.
And so I was basically looking through everything everyone was saying with this kind of critical eye to see what would actually work in Pakistan or in the developing world in general. And then the speech group presented their work, and I was like blown away because it was like speech recognition, speech synthesis, and dialogue management, which is putting these things together into actual usable systems, seemed to be something that could have huge impact in these parts of the world.
Especially where literacy is an issue.
Exactly. But the interesting thing was that even though many people had said, speech is going to be great for non-literate users because it's obvious,
but nobody had done anything about it.
Exactly. And so I met with the speech group, and I worked with 2 professors, Roni Rosenfeld and Alex Rudnicki, in the speech group. And it was just like the best experience because, in the beginning I was doing work which wasn't directly related to developing world stuff. And that was kind of, a test for my own patience of, can I really do this, or do I really want to do this? And to be honest, at one point I was actually thinking of quitting the program and just leaving with a master's and getting a job somewhere, because it wasn't stuff that, you're millions of miles from home and you're doing something which isn't directly, interesting to you. Do you really want to do it? But at one point, we got this funding for doing a project in ICT for development, which is using speech technologies for community health workers. I wrote the proposal with my advisor, and it got funded. So it was one of the 17 approved out of 150 or so applications. So it was very selective. It was Microsoft Research funded us. And that was the start of the Healthline, Project Healthline, which I've been doing for the past 3 years.
Okay.
And I just finished my PhD last month, so it's been a long kind of a process, but it's been a fun one. And I think I've learned a whole lot more than I would have in any other traditional kind of computer science kind of PhD. One of the most interesting things is that normally for computer science, you sit at the university.
Right.
You sit in the lab or you sit at home and you think and you do stuff. But here I was actually, I spent 2 years in Pakistan. And many other months traveling back and forth for short trips here.
And actually working with the communities, right?
Exactly. So we were initially working with Aga Khan University, the Community Health Sciences Department.
Right.
And then eventually working with HANDS, which is an NGO that spun out of AKU actually. And they have amazing outreach in Sindh.
Right.
They have community health workers who are women with minimal training, maybe a few days worth of training, who provide health services to their communities.
Right.
And what we see is that often, and independent evaluations have always been saying that knowledge or their training and their knowledge is a huge bottleneck.
Right.
And of course, if they're not literate, they're not going to be able to read the manuals that you give them.
Of course.
And in fact, maybe the manuals themselves are designed for literate people. So even if they could read the information or
It
get
wouldn't
them,
make
it
much
wouldn't
sense
make
to
much
them,
sense.
yeah.
Exactly. So that's the kind of the prospect with which we started. We said, can we provide health information to community health workers over the phone?
Right.
And not just using a touch-tone system, but a speech system where they can speak in their local language and get responses in their local language, and through some sort of conversation with an automated system, get access to the information they need to do their work. And we weren't thinking of this as a diagnosis kind of a tool that there's a patient right now, I'm going to call the system and get an answer. It was more like a offline training, continuing education kind of a thing.
And long-term sort of knowledge building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we tested this. We designed, developed, built, and tested these systems in a variety of places in Sindh, in Dadu and in Umarkot, and even in outskirts of Karachi. And the upshot of it all this research is basically that we can build speech recognition systems for any language with minimal cost and effort. We came up with this novel approach to do that,
right.
And we're now looking at that in a much bigger way to scale it out and make it much more robust for any NGO or any organization to just take it and run with it and make a system in Dharki if they wanted, or Pashto,
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting because a lot of people have expressed interest in this or in speech in general, but no one knows how to do it. It's still a black art.
Right.
And we're trying to see, well, can we make that even easier than it's been made, especially for non-Western languages. So US English, German, Spanish, French, these are the languages for which you have a lot of speech recognition resources, but nothing for, Balochi and so on. And even Urdu, there's
Even
nothing for Urdu.
Yeah.
So that's one exciting thing that came out of this. And the other thing was that we saw that speech systems, when you shift from IVR, like touch-tone, to a system where the person that's actually speaking with the system, your success goes way up. So they're much more able to access and understand that information. Even if the information is left untouched, it's the same information in both systems, but their ability to answer questions based on it goes way up when you switch to the speech system. And this is true for both non-literate as well as literate health workers.
Yes, because even literate people find many things difficult to understand.
Absolutely. And it's also about the comfort level. Like, you can actually be very literate, but it doesn't mean that you're very sort of comfortable with navigating and using text.
Right.
So that's pretty exciting. And now I'm working with HANDS to scale up the system and make it.
But is it actually being used somewhere right now?
So that's the plan. So it was you can call it a lab study, but we did it in the village field site.
Right.
But it was still we called the health workers in. It was very controlled kind of an environment. Mm-hmm. And now we're trying to see, let's just make this and train them on how to use it, and then just see what happens and see whether they use it and how much they use it, and whether if they're incentivized to use it, do they use it more, and does their quality of service in the health services, does that go up as a result of this?
Okay.
So that's pretty exciting, and it's really great to be able to see stuff that you work on as a research project actually be used in the real world. Yeah. And the best part for me is that when I meet HANDS, it's clear that they're very eager to take this and use it. Okay. Because often what you see in ICTD projects is that you did your research, nice, we'll move on with business as usual.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think they see that it's worked and that we have a proof of concept, and they're now interested in taking it to the next step.
That's great. I mean, that's the perfect scenario.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So
you're going to continue with this?
Yes. Yes, and there's this, and there's a bunch of other ideas that my advisor and I are working on at the same time. But the primary sort of aim in most of this work is voice applications in developing countries. I think that's an area that just hasn't been tapped. The expertise doesn't exist, and because the expertise doesn't exist, the ideas for what's possible is also not really been hashed out. But we think with some very simple technology, you can actually make things that potentially millions or even many more than that would
so then
use.
It would also become commercially viable and very, very low cost.
Absolutely, and I think what interests us the most in this work is sort of trying to find that fine line between something that's completely commercial and just making money, versus something that's really useful but not sustainable, and having that sustainability built in, but keeping it,
because that's important. Otherwise, it ends up just being a prototype or a project that doesn't go any further.
Right. So that's and even within that, seeing what uses you want to maybe charge for, and then have those uses cross-subsidize the other uses that you think have social value. But the major aim of this thing is sort of social rather than profit making. Okay. So, but that's and it's good to see that there's a lot of other groups. I mean, social entrepreneurship is essentially that in a nutshell. So it's good that there's already a a growing consensus around this as a model, and we're definitely interested in getting into that as well.
Terrific. And do you think perhaps within universities there should be now a trend or a move towards encouraging young people to perhaps develop not just high-tech computer science projects, but also look at ICT for D?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the things that I was really hoping would happen at LUMS in a big way, and to some extent it started.
It has started.
Dr. Omar Saif, who is actually a LUMS grad as well, and he's back there, is doing some incredible work, and he's won many awards, and it's great to see that there's visibility for this kind of work. And I think it's we need to encourage that and have much more of that. And maybe LUMS could be one of the places where this becomes, a big research topic, because one of the best things about LUMS is that it's got a social science program, it's got a business school, it's got a computer science school, and if you really want to make something work, you need all three to come together.
The three disciplines have to come together.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we see very little interdisciplinarity in Pakistan, and even in LUMS, which you'd hope would be. So I mean, if someone's watching this at LUMS, I strongly recommend do some more interdisciplinary stuff, and if we're happy to interact or mentor or work with as partners on projects. So get in touch with me if you have an idea and you'd like to explore it.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've been trying to encourage this sort of thing at most of the major universities who have business and computer science programs, that get them together, get them to use their strengths to work on projects together that will provide solutions for the community.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you're still so excited about it, that it wasn't just a university project, and that you're going to continue with that. That's great. Now, let's get to Jadoo, which is also an exciting project, although that's a purely commercial project.
Sure.
When did you first work out the prototype for Jadoo? And it's a major success. I think you were one of the first people who actually sold an application on the App Store from Pakistan, and it's selling at a high price.
Right.
It's not a free product, it's not a 99 cents product, it's a $25 product. So tell us about that.
Sure. So it's pretty interesting. I was in Pakistan, working on my PhD, and the thing is, in ICTD work, you have a lot of downtime, because you're meeting with someone and they're like, we're busy this week, come back next week, and so then you're basically just busy waiting. So at one of these points, I had an iPhone, and I was pretty impressed with it. I mean, it's a great technology. This is when the iPhone was available, but the App Store didn't exist. So the only applications that you could get were through this jailbreak kind of process. And there was this VNC application on the iPhone, and VNC is virtual network computing. It's a remote desktop application for the iPhone. It's a remote desktop protocol in general, and they had a version on it for the iPhone. Some guy had made it, and it was a really robust kind of a thing. It worked really well, but the user interface was the obvious one that you could think of, which is that it shows you the entire screen, and if you click on something, the mouse jumps to that point and clicks. So any kind of movement would be very costly potentially. Like there's a high cost to touching it, so you wouldn't want to touch it, And my idea was, well, that's really bad. We shouldn't be afraid to do stuff. It should be much easier to use.
And it should be intuitive. It should just happen.
Intuitive, exactly. And so the thing was that you already have like the trackpad on your laptop, and people are using these touch devices to control desktops. So why can't we do that here? And so it was just this idea which came up, and I talked to my brother about it, and I remember we were at Subway, and I said, hey, what about this idea? And he said, yeah, that's a nice idea. But an idea is worthless unless you actually do something about it.
Right.
So I'd never programmed on a Mac, never even touched a MacBook, and that means Objective-C, which is the programming language for that. But I was just really interested in doing this and seeing what happens. So I just went back and, back as in my home in Karachi, and I downloaded the tool chain, which is the way you can compile code that would run on the iPhone.
Right.
And the great thing at the time was that there were these amazing people out there on the internet who would put up all sorts of instructions to help you, build applications yourself, because there was no official SDK at this time.
Right.
In fact, there weren't even any indications that there would be an SDK.
Okay.
So this is before March 6th, where they announced the SDK. So I got all this stuff. The best part was that this application was open source. So I got the source for this application. And I just made a couple of minor tweaks and actually took away the desktop screen. So it was a blank screen, like all you could see was a blank screen. But it's still connected to the computer, and it became a wireless touchpad.
Okay.
So I called it Touchpad for iPhone, like, generic name, no branding skills whatsoever.
It says what it is.
Exactly, it's a touchpad for iPhone.
Yeah.
And I made a YouTube video, because by that point I knew that, if you want to make something and put it out there, you have to have a video.
Right.
And so I made this YouTube video. I didn't want to buy web space, and I didn't want to even register a domain name. So this is like completely zero cost work, right?
Right.
I registered touchpadiphone.blogspot.com, and I put up a little post just saying what it was, and linked to the code, and linked to who wrote the original source code and so on. And I put up the video there. And then I just sent in an email, or sent in a tip to Gizmodo and Engadget, the big tech blogs, and the unofficial Apple weblog. And I also submitted this to dig.com. And I didn't know what to expect. This is the first time I'd done something like this, but luckily they all took it up. And so it was on all these big blog sites, it was on Dig. So within 3 days I had like 100,000 page views on the video.
Okay.
And that was pretty incredible for me, because I didn't realize that A, that I could do something like that, but also that B, sitting in Karachi, you had all the tools at your disposal to do any of this.
Right.
And now the thing was, it was a very simple proof of concept kind of a thing, that this can actually happen. Didn't really spend much time on improving it. The video was kind of cute. It had the School of Rock video, and showing them how to use it and so on. As music.
But that's because of your interest for music as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So I wouldn't put I try to not put a video up unless it was fun and like musical and so on.
Right.
So that happened, and it started off as a weekend project. Like I said to myself, I'm just going to do this weekend, and that's it. But as people started using it, it turned out that people started writing back to me and saying, "Hey, this is great. Can you fix this? Can you add that?" And I said, "Okay, if there's so many people in the world using this, maybe I should do that."
Right.
So I started adding some more features and release version 2. And by that time, I had started calling it Touchpad Pro, just because I could actually get touchpadpro.com, I couldn't get touchpad.com. So
Okay.
the curse of the domain
Good
names
reason.
and yeah, exactly right. So then I actually. People, I think I made like $25 in donations, because people were just like, "Oh, this is nice and worth it," and so on. So I used that money to actually buy the domain name, right? Because I was like, let me try to keep zero costs. So I'm not putting any of my own money in this. And as a grad student, you don't have much money to play with either way. So I did that, and version 2 was out, and it was working much better. But the lesson I learned at that point, and I learned it again and again, was that you're only in use once, and you can only launch once.
Right.
So, none of the blogs ever since then, none of the big blogs or Dig has ever taken up any of this stuff ever again.
Okay.
Even though it's like a million times better than what it was in the beginning.
But an update is not sensational.
Right. And the thing is, an update is sensational if you're Kindle.
Right.
Kindle, 1.1, the new firmware has been released, But if you're just a regular app, whatever. Anyway, so by version 3, I added a feature where you'd buy an application for Windows, which was a media server essentially, and then the iPhone app would connect with it. And it was $5, so very minimal price.
Right.
But you could control your media, and you could change the volume and change the tracks and so on. Sort of like what the Apple Remote app on the iPhone does, but much stripped down version of it, and it was still within the confines of this VNC kind of client.
Right.
And so people started buying that, and it was like it was much more than the donations I was making. So if someone's thinking of a donation model versus a paid model, donations you make much more with charging even a small amount than you ever could with donations.
Right.
Even though we think that people are nice and they donate, they actually don't, because they think everyone else is nice and they're going to be donating, so I don't need to donate.
I can just have it for free.
Exactly. And that's my, amateur psychology sort of explanation. I don't know what really happens.
Right.
So I did this, $3 thing, and it was pretty funny because my wife and I were in Italy that month. So I launched and we went to Italy for this conference of mine, and we were just sightseeing separately from that human-computer interaction workshop conference. And it's really expensive there, right? And so we're eating at these restaurants, and it's like 40 euros for food that wasn't really good, and we're like, oh my god, how can we afford this? But then I check my email on the iPhone, and it's like a couple of people bought the app. Like, okay, you offset that cost, sort of.
We can afford this.
Yeah, and not even that we can afford it, but it's kind of like subsidized a bit because so it's okay. But anyways, it was a lot of fun that month, just seeing like a small trickle of sort of actual income coming in. And then at that point, I decided, okay, let me implement this one feature which I think is going to be really good, which was bringing the desktop back.
Okay.
So not just making it a blank screen and you're controlling the thing from in front of it, but now having the desktop back so you can be anywhere in the world and you can still control your computer.
Right.
And the thing was, bringing the desktop back, but with the same old interface as what was there before wouldn't make any sense because the advantage of this was that it's like a touchpad.
Right.
So I said, let me try overlaying that touchpad interface over this remote desktop. So showing the remote desktop, but the mouse is always in the center, and it's like as you move it, the screen kind of shifts with you.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's non-intuitive when you explain it to someone, but once they start using it, like the learning curve is like zoop, like you've immediately gotten it. Because everyone's used these touchpads.
Of course.
So I put that up. I mean, I made that, and I saw that it was working pretty well. And I did some, there was a small trick whereby the iPhone can only display a certain resolution. Mm-hmm. So no VNC application has more than like 1200 by 1000 or something pixels. Right. Mm-hmm. But people have much bigger screens and they want to access all of that. And what the app would do is just crash. That's not a good thing. Okay. So I made this small thing whereby you had this one big screen, and then as you got to the edge of it, it would show you the next screen. Okay. So kind of like an interim kind of a hack, which got that to work, and people.
Which was like turning the page.
Exactly. Some people weren't too happy about it, but most people were happy that they could actually just access their app desktop because they couldn't before.
Didn't crash.
And it didn't crash. It was really good about that. Now the pricing was like a big thing. Like, how do I price this thing? Right? And I know it's a big important feature, so I decided to charge $15 to everyone who was buying this from the States.
Okay.
And for everyone outside the States, it would be 15 euros.
Okay.
And at that point, and we just been to Italy, right? And euros are like were 1.58 of the dollar.
Right.
So 1.5 times what you're paying there. And I figured that for people, it's more the psychology of the 15 versus like the dollar or the euro doesn't matter that much. But I know for a fact that in the States, if you see a euro sign, you freak out. You're like, right. I don't know what this means. I'm not buying it. So I did this geo IP based thing whereby if you came from the States, $15, otherwise 15 euros. And in like literally in the first few hours of launching this, like this, if I was making like from my money kind of thing was like this small graph, it like boom, it
wow.
went way up.
Okay.
And that was the first point at which I saw that this is actually this could
become a commercial product.
Something exactly. And so then I decided, okay, until that point, I was really thinking of this as an extended weekend project. Like, okay, I'll put some more time in it, I'll do this, I'll do that. And this point, I'm like, okay, this deserves some extra effort. So then I decided to actually re-implement it from scratch for the App Store.
Okay.
Because
by this time there was an App Store and there
was
an
SDK. There was going to be, but they'd
okay.
announced the App Store and the SDK now existed.
Okay.
And so then I said, okay, let me do this properly now. And so I restarted from scratch. And what's great about writing code from scratch is that you actually know everything about that code. So I implemented, every single line of code was my own. And by the end of it, I had an application that was actually much better than the original one because now I knew where everything was happening. And so, for instance, instead of that screen switch thing, you could now have like even a 5,000 by 5,000 pixel screen,
wow.
and you could zoom in and zoom out without any issue and without any crashes. And even to today, there's no other VNC or remote desktop application that has large screen support. Even big companies, for instance, LogMeIn has a great remote desktop tool out there, but they only support very small resolutions, and if you have some bigger than that, it crashes. So a bunch of interesting or a bunch of features that make it work better than it would, and that's just about attention to detail. You really want to make go that extra mile to make it.
Makes the user experience so much better.
Exactly.
And people are willing to pay for good user experience.
Right. Exactly. And in fact, So the other thing that I put in was there's a graphic. So the vortex. And so when you log into the application, instead of just saying loading, it actually shows a spinning vortex, and then once the page loads, you actually zoom through that vortex like you're going through some sort of, like warp drive kind of a thing, right? And it's exciting and it's fun, you know. And I think, for the people who grew up, around my age, we grew up playing computer games, and we still play computer games, and so it's nice to be able to bridge that divide between games and productivity tools. And why can't we have some fun when we're doing work as well?
Indeed.
So and a lot of people like that, and I'm glad that they do. But yeah, so it's been. It was actually launched as Teleport originally, and then I changed the name to Jadoo VNC. But it's been doing really well in the App Store. And for me, the big challenge has been balancing, my time doing my PhD and then doing Jadoo VNC. Now that I'm done with my PhD, I can actually, devote much more time to this and grow it out as a business, and that's what I'm going to be doing. But I think, what I learned from this is that it's really possible to do a bunch of things at the same time.
Right.
And you should, if you're like a student who's, doing some stuff at work, and if you find that interesting, you can still spend, your free time doing other stuff, and it might not bear fruit, but you learned something and you had fun. And it might just, become something. So, if you have an idea, just pursue it, because who knows what's going to end up. And it's not expensive to do this stuff either.
Yeah,
because,
most of the time it wasn't costing you anything
exactly,
to do it.
Exactly. So I guess I had to buy the iPhone initially.
But you would have bought anyway.
and there's ways, you could use a simulator, for instance, instead of buying one if you want to make something. And so, yeah, I think what's incredible is that now it's the democratization of innovation, in a sense, that you don't have to have millions of dollars worth of money to be able to invest and make something. You can just sit at home and make stuff and put it out there and market it without spending a cent. So what a great time to be living in, and we should be innovating much more. Then it's sad in a sense that I feel that there's so much potential there, but people either don't know that they can or they don't know how to. But it would be great to see many more people taking up initiative and actually doing things.
How do you think we can actually encourage people to do more innovation? There's so much talent in this country, and there is innovation going on, but as you said, not enough people are trying things, maybe because of the risk of failure?
Right. I think one of it is the culture.
Okay.
That, I was talking with someone yesterday, and they were talking about how in the States, equity is a big deal. Like in a company, you want to have ownership, and you might be okay with a lower salary, but but in Pakistan, it's all about the salary. Which sort of suggests that either A, people don't have faith in the company, which is a separate thing, but also B, I think that the culture of equity doesn't exist. Whereas in Silicon Valley, you'd work for free for 3 years as long as you had like 50% in the company or like a big stake. So I think that's one of the things, culture is really hard to change, and it's going to take a while. And it's going to take some successes for people to point to and say, hey, those guys did this, and this is what happened, and maybe now I can follow that as well. But the other thing I think is, I guess seeing other examples of people who've done it, and also mentoring. I think that's really important, because as good as it is to sort of get an idea and do stuff, your productivity goes so much higher if you have someone that you can talk to and get advice from.
Use as a sounding board. So
exactly.
That, so if you're on the wrong track, you have the chance to move.
Right.
And if you're on the right track, somebody's saying, yeah, go for it.
Exactly. So one of the things I'm actually interested in setting up, and if someone's watching this and wants to join up, please get in touch with me, is setting up something whereby like the best and brightest kids coming out of universities can work in within a framework, so maybe within this iPhone application or the other stuff that I'm working on, and I'd be interested in not just sharing the revenue and sharing whatever money wise, but also grooming them to become people that can maybe take on their own projects and do their own thing.
That's true.
But the thing is, for this to be worth my while, I'd want to work with just the very best.
And people who are excited about the technology and about the solution that they're coming up with.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, like, the way the economics of the world work, which is very surprising, if you're earning internationally, you can afford to pay very handsomely locally. So, the money isn't the bottleneck, it's the talent.
Right.
And, we keep talking about how the talent exists and so on, but I guess my challenge to the people watching this is that, if there is great talent, get in touch with me.
Okay.
And, I'll make it worth your while. And as long as you can sort of contribute intellectually and you have the passion to grow and, do stuff on your own, work with me, and I'll be happy to sort of, you don't have to be in this company for like forever. But I think that mentoring is really important.
It'll give them a start, and
Exactly.
the mentoring will happen They will learn how to actually work on a commercial product and the processes to follow and all that, which kids who are at university normally don't know.
Right, exactly. And like, you know, I think back to when I graduated. So I was in Pakistan for a year between my PhD and my my undergrad, and I was sort of really like thirsting to work on something interesting
and you didn't know
fun.
who
And there was nothing out there. And so I, you know, together with a friend, we started, you know, talking to companies that might want some software developed and stuff. But it was an uphill battle, and it wasn't very interesting work to begin with. But like if there was a guy, you know, who was doing iPhone apps that were selling internationally, and it had some innovation that's, you know, that's gotten, I mean, I've actually applied for a patent on the interface. So, I mean, if there was something that cool and that, you know, exciting, I'd dive in.
You would have loved to work
exactly.
with. Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm trying to say that if there are people out there who are in similar position, you know, get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to figure out something.
We'll share your email address with them.
Great.
Terrific. Now tell me, ICT for D, back to ICT for D. There's so many solutions that are needed.
Right.
Is there any way that we can encourage that to happen?
Yeah.
Other than LUMS, I mean, that's just one place. But is there any way that, is it because people feel that it's not going to make them any money?
I think that's actually a really, really good point. And, you know, in my experience, I feel that it's in some ways, because I have Jadoo VNC, it gives me the luxury of being able to do non-profit work.
Okay.
Because, you know, and so this is like a more philosophical point, but as a graduate, you know, someone who's now in the workforce, if you have a choice of doing stuff that's non-profit, that doesn't maybe earn you that much, but it's meaningful and it has social impact, versus doing something that's for profit, and maybe it, you know, adds value to some people's lives somewhere, some incremental value, but it isn't as meaningful as maybe, you know, helping bring up the health systems in a developing country. But it earns you enough to, you know, provide for yourself and your family, which is very important as well.
Yeah, of course. You can't live without food and shelter.
And the thing is that in a sense, we as society were disincentivizing people for doing good. We're incentivizing them for just doing random stuff that makes money. Right. And what a world we live in, right? I mean, why are our priorities such that way? And we can talk about, you know, the system and capitalism or whatever, that's fine. But I feel that within our own world, we should
be incentivizing people to do good.
Exactly. And so one of the ideas that I'm really interested in working with people on and building a team around is, can we have an organization that has like the best of the best? You know, the best designers, not just ICT people, but even like, you know, if someone wants to make a documentary, for instance, or if someone's like an anthropologist and wants to sort of understand things so that they can actually make an impact and make a difference, you know, get these people in the same umbrella and have some of them spend some of their time doing Western-facing, money-making stuff. Right. But then have the profits from that shared equally among everyone, so that you're free to do what you think is important.
Amazing.
And the thing is, in my life, this has worked out quite well. Because I have, you know,
and there's no reason that can't be sort of scaled up to include many more people.
And the funny thing is, I see a lot of people doing the same thing. You know, there's people who've earned well and are, you know, doing stuff that's on, you know, earning the money, but also doing, you know, interesting stuff. You know, Bill Gates is the biggest, you know, most visible example of that. But, you know, why wait till you're at the end of your, you know, productive life to do one thing
and
then
from the
start
beginning?
Then? Yeah. Why can't we do things at the same time? So that's one of the things I'm really excited about. And, you know, I think it's hard to find people who can cross between the for-profit and non-profit, and that's fine. But as long as you have people who are okay with the system, where some people are actually earning for everyone else, as long as we have a really small, and like, it doesn't have to scale, so it can be small, but a team of really motivated individuals who are interested in making a difference. And even, you know, hacking together stuff and making money of it is fine, but as long as it's for this purpose. I think you could do amazing things. So, you know, that's, again, you know,
you're open to that.
I'm open to that. So if you're if this excites you, you know, get in touch with me and let's see where this can go.
There are plenty of kids out there, I'm sure, who will be contacting you. That's great. Is there anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't covered?
Well, I think the one thing I just want to say, which we haven't touched upon, is the whole notion of ICDD in general. Yeah. It's by its nature so interdisciplinary. Like, you know, as technologists, we think that technology is the only answer and that the solution is only technological. And technology isn't. No. It's a small piece of a huge puzzle. But as technologists, we rarely are told that or learn that. And we actually think that you can just go somewhere, throw some technology down, and it's going to change everything. No, it's never going to happen. And I think an appreciation of the other side of things, both from a business and from a social science perspective, understanding how is it that you can actually make not
all
just
of them work together.
Exactly. There's systems, and often human systems. People have habits, have incentives, and so on.
Exactly.
And we need to sort of work within that and go beyond this technocentric mindset and really think of it in a bigger way. And I think there's enough people who have technical backgrounds, but I really encourage them to sort of talk with people who have different interests and backgrounds and experiences, or go out there and do something in a very small scale sort of a way, and be open to learning. Like if it fails, don't say, oh, those people were just really backwards and they couldn't use it. That's not the answer. It's that your solution didn't take into account the realities, and that's why it didn't work. So can you improve on that? So yeah, just having people keep an open, more of an open mind.
And similarly, people who are totally not technical
Right.
should not shy away from technology, because some of the
Exactly.
things they're extremely passionate about finding solutions to
Right.
may be helped with the use of technology. So I think both need to happen.
Exactly. That's a great point. It's like if you aren't from a technology background, the solutions you come up with technologically will be very simple. But a technologist could probably take that problem set, that's problem specification, and come up with really innovative solutions for it. And the two of you together could probably come up with a whole bunch of other
because
stuff.
you could explain to each other the whole breadth of what you're planning to do.
Exactly.
So if the social impact and all that is explained to a technologist, maybe he or she can look further than what he would look at
Right.
if he were just looking at it as a technology
Absolutely.
solution.
And I think the bottom line for both of those people, those types of people, is to just do something.
Yeah.
And when you're doing something, learn as much as you can, because that's like the best teacher. Experience, you can't beat experience. And there's like a whole world out there of stuff to do. So once we start doing it, we can sort of start learning, and then becoming better and then making better.
Yeah,
things
let's
and
not wait
making
until
change.
we know everything before we start
Yeah,
doing something.
Exactly.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jahanzeb. It's been great. It's been terrific, and I'm so delighted that you are so open to working with a lot more kids, and you feel that we need to increase the awareness that there is a lot to be done. And I hope a lot of our viewers will contact you, and do keep us in the loop if there's anything that we can do, CIO Pakistan and Pasha or Rabia and me individually. Please let us know.
Great, thanks a
Because
lot.
we're really excited that young people like you are in this space and are really excited about doing things for the community as opposed to just playing with technology.
Great, thanks a lot.
Good. See you again soon.
Yep.
That was an exciting conversation. I really, I just wanted to let him go on and on and on. And it's great that we've had this conversation with JahanzebSherwani. Do contact him. We will be running his email address on the video, right, Rabia? Yeah. Until next time, this is Jahara signing off from another episode of In the Line of Wire.